Most of us here are much older. How does the church encourage young ones to fight issues you speak of? Well, I think Pope Francis has done a great job with that. And he's spoken to them in their own language. There was a hubbub when he called on the youth in South America to hacer lío in Spanish, create a ruckus. But he said that in a context of saying, don't just go with the flow, go against the flow and get involved and do the dirty work, if you will, of the gospel. That is many times countercultural. And so he continues to practice to have the World Youth Days every 3 years or whenever they are. And that's a big part of that mission. And it continues on a local level in dioceses and in parishes. So we continue to ask and encourage our young people. Could you speak about Pope Francisco's comments about GOP building a wall along the U.S. border in Mexico being unchristian? Well, and I think what his intent in that comment was that if you're only talking about building walls and not bridges, then that's not the gospel. And so the church teaches that sovereign nations have a right to protect their borders. So I'm sure that the Pope doesn't dispute that. But I think his comment was along the lines of, if that's all you're concentrating on, then we need to build relationships. We need to build relationships as the U.S. with Mexico, with Central America, so that people can stay there in the country that they really want to stay. My parents are migrants from Mexico. If my dad had had a decent job, he would have stayed in Mexico. So I would have been in Monterrey. Although we can't issue visas, what actions can the church take to urge the U.S. to welcome and support refugees from Syria and Iraq, as well as from Africa and Central America? Who should we contact? What are those concrete steps? And I think the USCCB, the Bishops' Conference, has some concrete steps to reach out to Congress. First of all, to pass immigration reform that has been so politicized, but also to accept refugees. One of the frustrating things I hear from politicians, they said, well, we don't want to take Muslims, we'll just take the Christians. Well, we had tens of thousands of Christians on the southern border 2 summers ago, and we rejected them. So, yeah. Can we blame politicians? I just did. But why do we not hear more about immigration issues in our parishes, i.e. from the pulpit? Well, the crowd is not always as friendly as this one, for one thing. If there's a fixed number of immigrants allowed into the U.S., does it make sense to accept 10,000 refugees from the Middle East if it means 10,000 fewer from Latin America? And we've asked that the number be increased, and it seems to make sense to me with those who are coming for work, which most of them are that it be based on the rise and dips of the economy. And so if there's a need for it, and there's obviously a need because people are coming, they're finding jobs, usually very difficult jobs, that the jobs are there, but we don't want to own up to it and give them visas. And so I think the demand has to dictate in some way as well the number. U.S. policy in Puerto Rico is Pope Francis. I don't quite understand that one. What is exactly the disease we need to heal? It's a very broken society that starts with the family and its communities that are healthy, that leads to individuals that are healthy. So when we see individuals who despair, who lose hope, and so they turn to drugs and they turn to violence, then it's in some ways it's almost too late by that point. We have to intercept it by creating healthy families, by creating healthy communities. And that's where government has to get involved with churches, with local communities that build hope, that bring safety to communities. So when the police are not able to provide safety so that 10-year-old girls don't get raped in Central America and 9-year-old boys don't get recruited into violent, brutal gangs, then something is truly wrong. Can a Catholic provide funds to a foundation that is not approved by the Catholic Church? Well, it depends on why it's not approved. If there's something that goes fundamentally against our faith, then probably need to be careful about that. But we don't have to approve everything that you do. Use your own judgment. Okay. Pope Francis, faith and violence are incompatible. The church no longer legitimates slavery, torture, death penalty. Will you help the church no longer legitimate war? Well, the church has a tradition of the just war theory, and I agree with that theory. That governments have a responsibility to protect its citizens, and so there are certain cases that can be justified for war to protect an unjust aggressor, but there has to be a plan. There has to be the likelihood of success. There has to protect against hurting and killing civilians. And so there's a list of things that need to be encouraged. So I would not be in favor of saying a complete ban on war. We live in an imperfect world, and sometimes we do have to protect innocent citizens.